Okay, so today we're Mitzvah Hashem going to conclude the first part of understanding the Shitta of Chabad of this series. We're now in the fifth Shir, and B'siyata D'Shmaya V'Hesez Hashem we're going to be able today to finish at least this Yisoid, this Nakuda, and then Mitzvah Hashem will move on to the next Inyanim. But just to recap quickly where we're holding. We're actually holding in the middle of the machloikus between that Mittel Rebbe and Abarim Strashele, but let's just briefly go through it. So we've already discussed that the reason the Rebbe created the world is because he wants to do the betachtoinim. Dir betachtoinim, says the Alter Rebbe, is not only dir betachtoinim. How do you do what's dir betachtoinim? Is giloy elikus. Yeah, that everything you look at should, as we say in Yiddish, so der Herren elikus. You should be able to appreciate elikus in everything. You look at a table, you don't see a table, you see elikus. Yeah. How do you get the dir betachtoinim? How do you get dir betachtoinim? The Rebbe gave us 613 mitzvahs. You makayim the mitzvahs. The mitzvah makes a dir betachtoinim. It takes gashmias, makes that in gashmias we should be able to use the gashmias for the Eibishter, and that memela, that's automatic. That is dir betachtoinim. Says the Alter Rebbe that there you've changed gashmias, you've changed olam hazeh. What you haven't changed is yourself. The individual hasn't changed. The individual has done many good things, but he himself, how has he changed? But Narvas, dir betachtoinim, gilu elikus, a hakorin elikus, a realization, a reality, an understanding of elikus has to also be in the mind. That's the main chiddush of the Alter Rebbe. It also has to be in the mind. And because Adam Rishon ate from Eitz Hadas, and this is very important for this year specifically, because Adam Rishon eats from Eitz Hadas, therefore, why did he eat from Eitz Hadas? Because he wanted to feel. He didn't want only to be academic. He didn't want only to live his life. The person lives their life 100% with seichel. So then it's brilliant, but they can't feel. If they can't feel, because a real seichel, a real academic can't feel, doesn't get sidetracked by feeling by emotion or by gashmias or any sort of pleasure. It's all in the mind, and therefore Adam Rishon also wanted to be able to feel elikus. He wanted to have a physical appreciation. By eating from the Eitz Hadas, he developed the physical taste buds. He developed physical geschmack in eating, and he also developed the physical memela. Emotion also became part of it. Once you could taste, so emotion also becomes part and parcel of the human. And now the human is no longer only a medaber. It doesn't only have the tchunas of medaber, which is chochmah, which is seichel. Doesn't only have the ability of the milas of a human. He also has an animalistic tendency, as a nefesh habahamis, which is pleasure, physical pleasure, not only academic pleasure, not only seichel pleasure, but physical pleasure. Okay, therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, not only do we have to be mevarer, we have to make a dir betachtoinim in our mind, not only do we have to get that our mind should have a korin elikus, that our mind should be able to see getlichkeit, but also we should be able to feel it. Good. Now, and then we discussed that there was a machloikus in the Alter Rebbe and the other Talmidei, many of the other Talmidei Amagid. The other Talmidei Amagid said that most people can't feel it, and therefore the most important thing is kashrus, because when kashrus, a Rebbe could take all the Maisa HaMitzvahs, which ultimately l'choladeis is the most important thing. And they could take all the Maisa HaMitzvahs and take it exactly where it needs to go, to without having the human, with the more person, the more individual that there is in the more self-feeling that there is, the harder it is to work, the harder it is for that to be a bittul, the harder it is for that to work, for the Rebbe to work with this. There's an opposition against this. Well, the minute there's a person, so there's an opposition to the other person that's trying to work through him, and therefore it becomes harder to elevate those mitzvahs and to elevate that Torah. It's not only harder; it becomes sometimes less realistic, less able. Nevertheless, says the Alter Rebbe, that you still need to make a dir betachtoinim in kop. You still need to have it in mind. Okay, this is something that we've addressed at length, and therefore the Alter Rebbe focuses on something called hisbonenus. In fact, the chatchila before was called Shittas Chabad in the machloikus, which we haven't really addressed. In the second year, we addressed it a bit. Machloikus in the Alter Rebbe and Avraham Kaliski, which Mitzvah Hashem will get to when we discuss the concept of mashpiyim. We'll get to that Mitzvah Hashem, but over there, he calls it, Avraham Kaliski calls it specifically the Shittas HaHisbonenus. So in a word, if we want to sum up what is the Shitta of the Alter Rebbe, what is Shittas Chabad, it's the Shittas HaHisbonenus. It's the notion that when a person thinks, that every single person is capable of thinking. Every single person is capable of having a personal feeling for the Eibishter, and a personal understanding in the Eibishter. And therefore, that is what a person needs to focus on. Shittas ha'isboinunus, derech ha'isboinunus. Chabad means, the Shitta of Chabad, the difference between the Alter Rebbe and the other Talmidei HaMaggid is in this concept of isboinunus, which is that every single individual must da'as elikei avicha. The Alter Rebbe takes it to mean that da'as elikei avicha means you must understand elikus. Some people more, some people less, depending on the ability of the person. What does it mean to understand elikus? So there's knowing, which means I can open a sefer and I can know a concept. And then there's being able, thinking it through so deeply and so thoroughly and so realistically that we're able to connect to this elikus. We're able to connect to that which we're learning so seriously that it shifts our thinking, it shifts the way we think. And we suddenly think about, we stop seeing something in a way that we saw, in a way that we want. We stop seeing something one way, we stop totally seeing it another way, even if it's impossible to actually see it physically, but we could see it in our mind's eye clearly. We have a clear understanding and a clear reality, a clear realization of what this thing is. And in order to be able to get, and that's what emotion comes from. Real emotion, not fake emotion, real emotion. And this is something we're going to address Mitzvah Shem later today. Real emotion comes from the mind, comes from this deep, deep understanding. Okay, says the Alter Rebbe, that it's true that you need to have bittul to a tzaddik, and a tzaddik can help you get to the highest levels that you need to get to. Nevertheless, don't change the reality is we need to make a dira b'tachtoinim. Dira b'tachtoinim has to be in the human himself. The human has to elevate himself. Dira means it's changed. There's something changed about it. It's different. Tefillin was gashmis, is now ruchnius. Food that was eaten with a bracha, that was eaten l'shem shamayim, is now ruchnius dika food, is now something ruchni. You took the gashmis, kept it, remained gashmis. Nevertheless, it becomes ruchnius, it becomes holy. The same thing, the human being has to become holy in that way. How does he become holy in that way? He's not only a conduit, he's not only the arms through which the mitzvah gets done, he himself is a walking, perceiving elikus. How is he himself a walking elikus perceiver? By understanding something to such an extent that that it shifts his whole way of thinking. He suddenly doesn't see anymore a table, he suddenly sees a elikus. Okay, this is what the Alter Rebbe's shit is. The question was in emotion. How important is emotion? So in the last shir, we discussed one concept. We discussed that there was a machlokes after the Istalkus of the Alter Rebbe had a Talmud, a key Talmud, the Talmud, if you could call it that. If you can call anybody the Talmud, so it was Reb Aaron Strashele, Reb Aaron Alevi Horowitz. He was a Horowitz. He was he came to the Alter Rebbe right at the beginning of the Nesius of the Alter Rebbe. He talked how he had mamash had walking privileges. Him and the Mittler Rebbe. He was the Mittler Rebbe's mashpia when the Mittler Rebbe was younger. And furthermore, him and the Mittler Rebbe were extremely close, and he was mamash like a son to the Alter Rebbe. He moved to Liadi when the Alter Rebbe moved to Liadi. And we discussed that at some point there was something happened over there, which I'm not exactly sure what. It's not discussed much. And he moved from Liadi. He moved back to his hometown of Ursha. And then after the Istalkus of the Alter Rebbe, the question is who's going to take over. And there's a machlokes in the Chassidim. Some are tiny, the Mittler Rebbe has to take over. It's poshet outside some. Forget everything else, the Mittler Rebbe has to take over. The Mittler Rebbe is the Alter Rebbe's son. And at that point, despite the fact that it was right at the beginning of this concept of a son taking over from the father, there was the push that the Mittler Rebbe should take over. You find it from a Pinchas Koritzer, from a Pinchas Reizes, who writes clearly that he heard from the Alter Rebbe that the Mittler Rebbe should take over, which is a very interesting letter because the Pinchas Koritzer, the Pinchas Reizes, there was talk that the Pinchas Reizes should become Rebbe. And there was a group of Chassidim that sent a zettel, a ksavis kashrus, to the Pinchas Reizes. He sent him a pan. And the Pinchas Reizes was lavosh levonim. He put on white clothes, because the Rebbes in those days wore white clothes. He was makabel. He said, I'll do it. And he put his foot on the wagon that was going to take him to wherever the Chassidim were asking him to move to. The niftechuloi, it became opened up for him, the shvili derakia. He suddenly understood things that he never understood before. He was able to perceive things. He was makabel on himself, the Rabbistve, and he was able to he was able to see things that he was never able to see. And so Pinchas said it's not for him. It's interesting because afterwards he says that the Alter Rebbe told him he wanted the Mittler Rebbe to become a Rebbe. But this is not for him. Why? A Rebbe is like a boy in a Rebbe. He could see that these dargas that he was now able to see, it wasn't where he was supposed to be. It wasn't who he was. It wasn't him. He was given a shrara, he was given an avdus, yeah, he was given a leadership, and therefore the Eibishter gave him the koiches that he needed. But nevertheless, it wasn't him. And being a real chassid, he was mamash. He said it's not for him, and he went away and he traveled to the Mittel Rebbe. Yet Reb Aaron, who's not yet in Srashela Bechlal. Reb Aaron is a lot of Talmidim go to him. He was the Talmud of the Alter Rebbe, and he gets a following, and there becomes a discussion. So again, a large part of it is: do you take a Talmud, or does the son get it? That's a large part of this discussion. Together with that, there's a fundamental machloikes in Chabad, in what is it, in how to act. And last year we talked about it. Possibly, I tried to give you over with the personality. You see the personality between the Rebbe and Sasha. That's how I tried to describe it. The Mittel Rebbe was able to sat for hours. You didn't see a thing. So despite what was going on in the Mittel Rebbe's mind, and you saw that Pasha from the amount of sweat and amount of hours, but you could see in the stories that the Mittel Rebbe would stand, and the Shamash was able to turn the Mittel Rebbe around, that he moved into the middle of the room and he didn't feel anything, he wasn't able to see anything. He writes from Purim Noiroim, the whole story. With all that, so you had the Mittel Rebbe on one, and then you had that was one style. And then you had the style of Rebbe Sashela, which followed very similar to the style of the Alter Rebbe, which was that he couldn't contain himself. I used that, the personality, if you could call it personality, you're talking about tzaddikim, but their personality was based on the derech, yeah, the way they was the derech. So the derech of the Mittel Rebbe, which was much more in the mind, and the derech of Rebbe Sashela, which was much more in the heart, which was much more feeling. And the question was, it became a machlokas, which one is more important? Not which one, I'm sorry, I apologize, not which one is more important. How important is emotion? It says Rebbe Sashela, emotion, what do you mean? Dire B'tachtoinim is about arousing the emotion. It's about being able to feel an excitement for the Eibishter. That's what it's about. And last year we discussed one subject, one concept that the Mittel Rebbe disagreed on this whole idea. And we'll get to them. They think that not everybody's shaykh to feel that. And if you're not shaykh to feel that, should you still learn chassidus in that oifen? Should you still try? Let's put it this way: is there a point in his boinus if it's not going to come to a real hislavus, to a real feeling? Spilus, not hislavus, real spilus. And the Mittel Rebbe says, of course. Why? Because there's two things: there's feeling. What's the point of feeling? What's the point of feeling? What are you feeling? You're feeling, and of course, you're feeling the Eibishter. Bittul is a type of feeling. We discussed Perek Yud and Tanya. Bittul is a type of feeling. What does it mean, bittul is a type of feeling? If I am able to understand something and relate to the fact that this is so beyond my understanding, if I'm truly able to relate to the fact that this is so beyond my understanding, then automatically I'm bottled. I'm connecting. I'm learning Torah. It's automatic connecting. I'm connecting and I'm relating to it. I understand the idea to the extent that I don't understand the idea, let's even say. I understand it to the depth. That's a bittul. I don't want to repeat the whole shir. That's basically what we go. So the Mittel Rebbe says that it's true you need to feel. We're gonna expound on this in a moment. But the Mittel Rebbe says it's true you need to feel. Yes, Rebbe Aaron, it's true we need to feel. But there's something more important than feeling. Not something more important. Not being able to feel is not an excuse for not having his boinunus. His boinunus is a means in itself. Derech his boinunus is a means in itself. There was a war known today as the 7 Years' War. There was a war. There was a king called King Frederick. He was the Frederick II. He was the king in Prussia. Prussia is a country. It doesn't exist anymore. It's now it's an area. But it began as an area within what's today Germany, and it was a kingdom. It became a kingdom, and it expanded to part of Russia. And really, they had quite a lot of territory for many years. hundreds and hundreds of years. I think it started sometime in the 1500s, and it ended. It officially ended. It ended a little bit earlier, but it officially ended in I think 1913. It went under, just before the First World War, if I'm not mistaken. But it went. It was a kingdom, a serious kingdom. Anyway, this king called Frederick, he triggered the war. The war was America and France. England and France were some of the big ones of the war, and were really the main two protagonists, as they say, of the war, even though this Frederick triggered it, and even though he was very involved in conquering whole parts of countries for himself. But it was a lot to do with that's when England conquered America conquered the Americas from France, or most of America, I think North America, Central America. I didn't learn my world history ever, but it had long-term ramifications. This war, but kids, in the mid 1700s, before this talk, during the time of the Maggid, maybe even during the time of Baal Shem Tov, I think it was during the time of the Maggid. So he developed this Frederick. He didn't have the biggest army. There was armies that were much bigger than his that he was fighting. So he developed a method, a tactic, which was that, generally speaking, armies divided themselves. If you had an area that you were fighting over, so they divided themselves into three groups. And this way, every part of the territory that you're trying to either defend or capture, each part is defended by a group of soldiers. And if you're fighting a group of soldiers, so when you're coming to them with soldiers, you also have the same system. You have three groups of soldiers, each one attacking. So let's say one part's defending, the other part's attacking. So there's three groups of soldiers, three in a relatively small area that are, each one is attacking is focused on their area. This Frederick did something else. He came directly at the soldiers like regular, but then in this war punkt, there was a valley, he went down one side and came up the other way. But the point wasn't that. The point is that he didn't have all three groups attacking he didn't have each group attacking a group. He had all three groups of his soldiers attack one group. So they came from the other way. So instead of coming straight, they walked straight. They went down a valley. They're supposed to come up a mountain and attack them. He didn't do that. They went down a valley. They made as if they were going right. They ended up coming out left. They ended up coming out, if you look at me this way, so it will be left, they ended up coming left to one group of soldiers that's standing here. So this group of soldiers are here and this group is here. They come left, and they attacked this group of soldiers mercilessly. So you suddenly had a lot more soldiers focused all on one plugta, and then they were able to do the same with the next one. So they made the battle the other way. This was Frederick's. This is what he did, and he won him almost every war he fought. One of the biggest things that he did. So what do you have again? Instead of having three groups of soldiers fighting three groups of soldiers, you have three groups of soldiers fighting one. Either there's another two groups of soldiers that you're not even attacking. You'll get to them next. It's fine. Let them try and get to you over here. By that time, this whole group will be gone. So you'll take care of it. So this was his method. Something very interesting from this, and this is, in a way, this describes. It's a Machzedek writes. The Alter Rebbe talked about this just before the Istalkus in Vienna. The Alter Rebbe discussed this, that he learned from Avraham Malach said that he learned from this a very interesting. Generally speaking, you want to be Mavarer your midas. You want to elevate your midas. How do you do it? So simple. A person has Ava, called an Ava Zara. Person likes whatever, they like something in Gashmias. If a person doesn't like anything, a person doesn't have a kind of an Ava to the Eibishter. Yeah? If a person doesn't have an Ava to anything, Rabbi Rashab says that the first thing, in order to have an Ava to the Eibishter, you need to have Atzmai. At the beginning level, at the starting level, you need to appreciate yourself. You can't love somebody if you don't love yourself. Because whatever. Says the Alter Rebbe, finish. A person that says generally speaking, Derech HaMusar, most of Derech HaChassidus is, you have an Ava to something, so you want to be mahapich. That Ava, instead of having a love for Chesed Kana Ko, you have a love for the guy. Oh, perfect. They have a love for the guy. Change it. Have a love for the Eibishter. Yireh. You're in awe. You're worried. You're concerned of something you have embarrassment of people. Let's say you're shy of people. Use that midah to serve the Eibishter. The problem is that's a constant battle, and it's a constant zelo mazeh. There's an even amount. So as much ava that you have for gashmis, you can have for ruchnis. But the flip side, as much ava as you can have for ruchnis, you can have for gashmis. Therefore, says Rabbi Avraham HaMalech, in what is one of the foundations of Chassidus Chabad, you need to use all three of your midas to attack one midah of the Nefesh HaBahamis. So let's say a person has, he's a moral levena, he has a lot of geshma, he's a Baal Taiva. He loves, so a Baal Taiva could love a good Farbringen also. As the Pillow Paracha one time said, that if all the Baalei Taiva would know how geschmack it is to daven, they daven a whole day. It's a person, he's a beteva, he's a Baal Taiva. Maybe one day we'll learn the Tchunas HaNefesh, Nefesh HaOdam. So over there we'll learn how the Alter Rebbe describes and how Bechlal and Chassidus you have that if a person has a certain geschmack, that Rebbe Tani talks about, if a person has a certain ava, a certain love for something, a person by nature is more levena, a person by nature has a it's easier for him to get excited, it's easier for him to appreciate, he enjoys, he has enjoyment, he has physical enjoyments. Such a person, it's easier for him to be ma'abachet and ruchnius. Okay, says the Alter Rebbe, it's easier for him to have a geschmack and ruchnius also. Okay, good. Says Rabbi Avraham HaMalech, the problem is, again, if you're going to fight, if you're going to say, okay, I have a lot of ava, and if I'm going to use, instead of having ava to gashmias, I have ava to ruchnius. So each time you have an ava to gashmias, you have to straight away catch yourself and change that to ruchnius. Well, the catch yourself. It's a constant struggle. I have a better idea. Use all three koiches to fight one, meaning, like this. Imagine a person is constantly focused on the Yibishter. He's using Chabad. He's using his seichel. He's constantly, his mind is constantly working to understand something. He understands already a lot of things. Now he's holding by something he partially doesn't understand. He's confused again. This he doesn't understand. So he's learning it. And he's thinking about it. And he's relating to it. And he's trying to get it. And he's trying to understand it, and he's trying to relate it, and he's trying to get it. And so the whole time his mind is working, trying to understand tiefer and weiter, and his questions and his confusions and his lack of clarities. Remember, we're talking here about things you can't see, you can't feel, you can't touch. It's till you have clarity, and this takes a lot of koyach. So if a person's mind is constantly working, his mind is preoccupied. If his mind is preoccupied in understanding Elikus, then his ava memela falls away. His yira memela falls away. His rachmanis memela falls away, meaning his physical emotions, if he's going to have a geschmack for gashmis, if he's going to want to do something for gashmis, he might want to do it, and you never know. But says he might want to do it, and if he was only trying to work within the midas, within trying to catch his midas and shifting them, and it was one for one, so it was ava for ava, yira for yira. If it says chesed for chesed, gvura for gvura, if it was only like that, he might lose. Put all your energies into one thing, all the other ones are going to be in his battle. That's what Rabbi Avraham HaMalech says. That's what he learned from Frederick. Says Alter Rebbe, this is Chassidus Chabad. Put all your mind, connect to the Eibishter, put all your focus, learn Chassidus. Learn about Elikus. Learn Elikus. Learn it in a language that you can understand. Learn it and understand it. Automatically your mind is going to be so phenomenal, so connected with, so full with what with Elikus, that it's not an even fight anymore. All your koiches are working on one thing, understanding Elikus, on Elikus. If all your koiches are focused on Elikus, then midas are much less of an issue. Midas take much less. As strong as your midas ava is, your whole entire being is not busy with ava now. I'm sorry, it's busy with something much deeper, something much bigger, something much better. It's so focused on something legamri different. It doesn't come in. Ava doesn't come in over it. So you're not going to want the whole concept of the whole notion of I have a taiva. Es wilt sich this dover gashmi falls away. Because I'm using my seichel. I have seichel. Now let's get back to the Mittler Rebbe. So the Mittler Rebbe becomes Rebbe, and the Mittler Rebbe continues to teach this Yesod. If you recall, we talked that after Peterburg, the Alter Rebbe began to say this everything. Now there's one very important thing for this to work, and that is that whatever you're learning has to be translated into language that you're understanding. This says, if it's only about being Mekabel Hashra from a Rebbe, it could be language you don't understand. The Rebbe will imbue you with the Chayes. But that's what this is about. This is about you yourself, the individual himself, changing. Right? The individual actually changing. If the individual actually needs to change, so he needs to be able to understand what he's talking about. To understand what he's talking about, he needs to be able to relate to what he's talking about. To relate to what he's talking about, it has to be in language that he can understand. That's why the Alter Rebbe touched Tifa and Yonim Chassidus, Mishalim, Dogmois, everything where was a structure put in, everything fit into a certain place. And there was a biur, there was asbara, and it's true, you're going to talk to a makubal. Go talk to the Ramak. Okay, go to the Ramak, Kabbalah anyway, but okay, talk to the Ramak and explain to him how you understand Oir. He's going to... Yeah, of course he understands it legamri different than that. Nevertheless, teach it in language that the individual understands. Every nekuda in Chassidus has to be taught. And this is what the Mittler Rebbe did. This is what he began to do. Already b'chayv of the Alter Rebbe. B'chayv of the Alter Rebbe, the Mittler Rebbe spoke Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe is in Yonim, like the Mittler Rebbe b'derech klal is Chassidus is, explaining the Alter Rebbe's Mamorim, but in biur, in oisius, that over and over and over to make sure that the regular person, all he needs to do is be a Yodea Sefer. He needs to know how to learn. He needs to be able to, he can't be illiterate, and he has to have a Shikla Avon, and he has to be a little bit, he has to have a Shaykhis to something. Such a person should be able to understand Chassidus. Meaning, such a person should be able to understand what he's talking about. In his own language. Of course he'll grow. In his own language, he has to be able to talk about. But then there came the problem, the question of emotion. Where does emotion come in? How deep do I understand? Do I have to understand deep enough to feel? This is the question. Says Rabban Sashal 100%. And if you don't feel, and all you're doing is academically learning Chassidus, you're missing the point. And Rabban Sashal writes a long letter explaining this. Now the Mittler Rebbe, in order to make it clear, wrote right at the beginning of his Nesius, in Tov Kofay and Dalet. Right at the beginning of his Nesius, he writes what's called Kuntrasa Espailas. And over there he explains, his spailos, the translation of his spailos is not excitement. The translation of his spailos in English is ecstasy. Ecstasy means such an excitement that I cannot contain myself. Right? The Alter Rebbe, how he davened, couldn't contain himself. Rabban Srashala the same way, he couldn't contain himself. It's called ecstasy. Arois came from sich legamri. Just lose yourself. You act in a way, somebody loses themselves. Somebody loses themselves often doesn't remember. You find this lahavdil. We're talking over here about the exam course, but you find this lahavdil in anger. A person that sometimes has a trauma from something, let's say, has PTSD, they will get very, very triggered by something. They'll do something, they'll be mishtoilo, they'll go crazy. And when they finish, they won't remember what they did. Because it's the other extreme of ecstasy. It's the other way of ecstasy. There's this total, you lose yourself, you don't know where you are, and you don't remember it even after sometimes. You can't even, there's spileless thing, such an excitement. Okay, says the Mittler Rebbe like this. Mittler Rebbe goes through a long harichis, kuntris, explaining it, and Mittler Rebbe basically explains that as 5 levels. We'll run through them very, very briefly. I don't want to understand that we're not learning this through on paper, and it's something that's complicated, so we'll go through it very, very quickly. Just so we can understand where the Mittler Rebbe is going to get to at the end. He explains very quickly. Number one, the first one is, in order to feel that this first level of aspilus is feeling elikos. Feeling, having excitement. I mean, I think about something, and that triggers an automatic emotion. That emotion is aspilus. Emotion is real. It's triggered for real. I'm aspilus. Okay. The next one is, I have an awareness of the truth. The minute I have an awareness of the truth, it's a hoidah, meaning we've discussed this in the Lag BaOmer that we had recently, but we've also discussed this in this series itself. That a person has hoidah, a person learns and suddenly he becomes bottled to the concept, which means I'm running through it quickly. I know. I apologize, but we're gonna end up talking too long if we don't go through this quickly. We can always revisit this Mitzvah Shem and talk about all these things more by Richazik. But the second level is which means that I appreciate the concept so much that I actually feel how rochik, how insignificant, how small I am, or how little I understand, and that triggers an automatic action. Okay, the next one is understanding, having excitement in my mind. What's been excitement in my mind? Not that I don't understand what's going on, not that I appreciate, I feel in my heart how sometimes you're learning something and you realize how vast the concept is. Happens. Yeah, you realize how vast the concept is. You realize, what was I thinking yesterday that I thought I was going to understand this? What was I thinking? I thought, okay, now I'll sit down, I'll learn the sugya, I'll learn this nakuda, and let's and somebody sits down, okay, let's understand Ur. So you start learning it a little bit. You start learning Chassidus. What was I thinking yesterday that I thought I was going to be able to trigger it? That I was going to be able to finish it in 3 hours. I was going to be able to learn through the whole thing. Yeah, so then you have Espilus HaMoichin. Espilus HaMoichin means that you're so excited, you're so energized by what you're learning, it triggers an automatic action. Oh, so meaning I understand this so well, but now I'm going to do this. This is a very strong point to be discussed in the last year. The excitement of la'asois, the excitement of action. Okay. Then there's the next level. Level number 4 is Espilus HaLeiv. Espilus HaLeiv is what we're talking about until now. Is a ecstasy of the heart, meaning that the heart can't contain itself. The individual can't contain himself. To the extent that it affects his body. There's interesting, in the Rishimis, you have that the Rebbe Rashab was not well. And he traveled, and in his travels, the Rebbe Rashab met Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud was one of the first, he's known as the father of psychology. He was one of the first psychologists, and he talked to the Rebbe Rashab, and he analyzed, being Sigmund Freud, he analyzed the Rebbe Rashab, and he was saying the reason why the Rebbe Rashab was feeling down is because his mind understands what the heart can't feel. Not that, it says, the body can't contain the depth of emotion that naturally, if there's such a thing as naturally by a Rebbe, there's naturally the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe understands, this is the way he, we're talking about Rebbe's, trying to hear from a psychoanalyst how he psychoanalyzes a Rebbe. It's not the but the Nakuda is he analyzed the Rebbe Rashab, that the reason why the Rebbe Rashab is feeling down is because his mind, his mind understands to the depth that it's impossible for the human body to be able to contain. So here's another way. So there was the Rabbanis Harshele that would jump on the tables. There's an Alter Rebbe that would roll on the floor and run around by davening. And then there's another way of it coming up. Then you have the fifth darga, says the Mittel Rebbe. And by the way, most of these dargas are only shaykh to tzaddikim. Yeah, the fifth darga, again, this is where it's really at. And the fifth darga is where a person is so ecstatic. He's so excited by that which he learns that he loses himself. He becomes ois metzias. He becomes an empty vessel. He becomes a keli only for the Eibishter. That means he can't even have the ability to run. If you talk about it in a human year, yeah, talk about it in a human thing. So you sometimes have fear from something. It triggers a run, fight or flight. It triggers some of them fight. Yeah, some of them trigger. I need to work on this. I need to do something about this. Another one will trigger. I need to run away. Another one, the person will freeze. Why did he freeze? He's so scared he can't run. In Ava, that would be that a person is so excited, he is so overwhelmed by what's happened, he's just frozen in his place. Says the Mittel Rebbe, that's the highest level. Okay, so we've gone through now the 5 levels of his pilot. It's only leman shleimus ha'inyan. We went through it a little bit, but even makif. Okay. Point being is like this. Says the Mittler Rebbe that says the Mittler Rebbe like this: you have to differentiate that two separate things. His spilus is exceptionally important. First of all, for the chassidim that are able to do it, the unique chassidim that the Rebbe used to teach, the chassidim that could end up becoming Rebbe Aaron is Rasheller. The chassidim that if they would be in the time of the Maggid, they would have been telling me they have Maggid, they themselves would have become Rebbes perhaps. Those types of people, tzaddikim, for them, spilus is a must. Then you have chassidim that are beinanim, for them, or then you have chassidim that are chassidim that are beinanim. His spilus is a must. Emotion is a must. Question is what emotion and at what level? Here's what Rav Anis Rashela says: emotion is a must, and that is the focus. The focus of any intellectual understanding must be physical excitement. Your heart has to pump quicker. You have to not be able to contain yourself. That is the ultimate. So until now we explained, the last time we explained it, that the difference is, we explained from one perspective. But the Rebbe says not everybody's shaykh to that. And you still need a spoinunos. Why? Like we just explained. His spoinunos, putting your mind fully to something, it creates that your mind starts thinking the whole day about Elikus. It stops being bothered by the narishkeiten, by the distractions. So on the one hand, you have Dirib Tachtoinim in your mind. Aleph, when you're having his boinunus to the best of your ability, so it's the best Dirib Tachtoinim you can make. You need the rest for the Rebbe. You have Dirib Tachtoinim of not only of your mind, you have Dirib Tachtoinim of your mind. You also have by being misboinen, you have to some extent also, hopefully, on the heart. Hopefully. And also, you're constantly motivated to do mitzvahs. It's the best motivation to do mitzvahs. And every person has the Ava Mesuteres, like we explained last time, and therefore, no such thing as having something as not having emotion. Anyway, might be Mesuteres. Anyway, okay. Now it says the Mittler Rebbe is much more. It's deeper than that. It's not only that you're not necessarily shaykh to spilus. Let's talk like this. Dirib Tachtoinim means that you actually changed. What happens if you only think that you changed? Is that what I'm asking? What happens if you only think that you changed? You think you did something. And you think it was enough. It's really not. The famous story with the Rambam with the cat. Yeah, that the Rambam said you can't change an animal. And they trained the cat to act like a human, but then the Rambam let out a mouse and suddenly ran after. Yeah, you can have a person that. Okay. So in order to make a Dirib Tachtoinim, it has to be real. You had to have truly changed. Says the Mittler Rebbe, emotion carries with it a number of challenges. Number one, the more emotional a person is, the more emotion a person has, the more that emotion can go into the wrong thing. Which means you meant well. And you developed an emotion, you developed an ava. But the minute you have an appreciation for the finer thing, the minute you have an appreciation, when a person is always involved with geschmack, he's always imbued with geschmack can very easily be changed to something that's not so good. So a tzaddik doesn't have to worry about that. By a beinani or a rosh v'toivloi, any person that could come to do an avera has to be extremely, extremely careful with where his ava goes. And therefore, therefore there's a risk. Spilus carries a risk. A focus on emotion carries a risk. So you have to be very careful about focusing on emotion. That's number one. Number two is that it can cause confusion, which means that a person who has a person that's excited. He could do 15 different things, starts one thing, goes to another. It could cause a person to run in all different directions. So it becomes very difficult to have a seder. It becomes very difficult to grow. La'at la'at. Echapt. He's excited about this. He's chapping that. Imagine a person who's what they call ADHD. Yeah, person ADHD. What's going on over there? A person has too much koyach too much dopamine, too much koyach in the brain. So there's a lot of action going on there. So there's so much action that there's 1,000 things he needs to do at the same. There's 1,000 things he needs to do. Yeah. So a person that has a lot of excitement, a very big excitement is not conducive to a structured, practical growth in any way. Too much excitement doesn't produce growth; produces excitement. Okay, so we've got two problems, two things to be wary of when it comes to things, when it comes to excitement. Another thing, says the Mittler Rebbe, another challenge, and here's where you have a very big challenge, here's where there's a fundamental challenge. Not only can it go wrong, sometimes you have a good Verbringen. It's been good, it was very geschmack. And you stand up after 10 hours, it's going geschmack, it's going reich, and you feel very, very good about this Verbringen. You mamish enjoy this Verbringen. And the next day you wake up late, and you feel so good about this Verbringen. 3 days, nothing came out of it, practically. And 3 days later, it's all gone. Why? Or a person has a good daven. Everybody every once in a while has a good daven. Surah de Leila, and a daven. It's gate. After davening, feels good. Yeah. Today was good. What do you mean it feels good? You achieved something. Achieving emotion is achievement. So if a person had a good isoirus by a Verbringen, he can walk away by that Verbringen saying genuinely, I achieved something. What was it? Isoirus. A person that leaves a good davening had a connection to the Eibishter. I felt a shaykh to the Eibishter. But the minute you say that, you've already achieved something. So you don't have any further motivation necessarily to do something else, to make it practical in Ma'aser B'Poel. Meaning, the minute you felt Esoirus, that feeling of Esoirus is important, and therefore that feeling of Esoirus is already an achievement, and therefore that feeling of a shaykhus to the Eibishter, of Esoirus, of a connection to the Eibishter, is an end of itself. It's not conducive. It doesn't make me have to do something. I feel accomplished. The minute I feel accomplished, I'm not motivated to do more. Fakert, let me have that feeling again. Let me now focus again on doing that feeling. When it comes, because the most important thing is Ma'aser mitzvahs, so when it comes to Ma'aser, it doesn't produce Ma'aser mitzvahs. So far we explained what could be the challenge. Until now we explained what was the problem, what was the challenge with this pilot, and not everybody shaykhs to have this ecstasy for the Eibishter. The best a person can get to is most people can get to is either a feeling for the Eibishter, or you can get it to be motivated to do the mitzvahs, or you can get mamish spilus in his mind, which is he has such an excitement an appreciation, a feeling to the truth, a feeling to the emes. Yes, the second level, a bit. Yeah. Or he can be motivated, spilus hamoichin. He understands deeply that he should be motivated enough to get the action, to get it done, which is your average esboinenus, what it gets the average person to. Good. This is all very important. This is all very good. The only thing is there are two things you have to worry. Making the overemphasis, my point is this, making the overemphasis on emotion, making the emphasis on feeling. Feeling comes with it, with red flags, aleph, and therefore these are things that you have to worry about. Number two, feeling comes not only with a red flag, feeling also because it's a end to itself. Because a person feels he has achieved by the emotion, it's not conducive. It doesn't necessarily for sure be good in Ma'aser mitzvahs. There's another thing which is to do with there's another Nesoid which the Alter Rebbe talks about, a chesaron that can be, which is Eitzachayim b'seichel. It's a is chokhmah. So I say it's is chokhmah. It's one kud. It's one point. That's you have that bittul. Chokhmah has to be bittul. Shekin bina is emotion. Bina can also develop emotion. Bina is not emotion, but bina can create. Unikas achitzoyin can create klipa because a person, when he thinks something through, a lot of the ideas are not even correct till he gets to the final point. What he thought about till then wasn't correct, and there's a lot of self. You have to develop your own brain. There's a lot of self-thinking. It's not about being mevatel to understand. It's a lot about trying to understand your understanding on your own. So there's a lot of unique achitzoinim that can come, which is whatever. It's a when it boils down to it, in a way, it's that there could become a challenge. Masha inkin by chokhmah there can't be any challenge. You can't go wrong, says Mitrabi. You can't go wrong by hisbonenus. No, you can't go wrong. I shouldn't say that because Mitrabi does say you can go wrong. But the Rebbe talks about hisbonenus, what you have to do to make sure that you don't just become academic thinkers. At the end of the day, you want to feel, but the point is, okay, so you have an overemphasis on something. It says to the Rebbe, your goal should not be to feel. Your goal should not be ecstasy. Your goal should not be to have to jump out of your kelim, to lose yourself legamri. Your goal should be to lose yourself academically legamri. That has to be your goal. So whereas Rabbi Anis, Rashela says, look how the Alter Rebbe acted. Look at some of the Talmidim of the Alter Rebbe. How they couldn't contain themselves. Try and get to there. That's what you need to try and get to. Says the Mittel Rebbe, you're looking at 10, 20 people. Look at everybody else. Everybody else is not shaykh to that, Aleph. And if you're going to push them to be shaykh to that, they're going to have there's a lot of pitfalls for them, which most probably they'll fall into. First pitfall of all being that they'll think that that's the end in itself, that the most important thing is this feeling, and they'll feel good about themselves and they won't push themselves any further. They achieved it. They achieved the feeling. It's done. Therefore, look at everybody else, says the Mittel Rebbe. Look, you have to look what else is going on. There's for thousands and thousands of other people, you cannot focus on his pilus. The focus has to be on putting your mind 100%, the whole time has to be clapping and kapalekus. That's what has to be pushing the focus on the mind 100% the entire time. In order to make sure, but remember, it has to be real. Has to be real. What's going on in the mind has to be real. Therefore, says the Mittel Rebbe, went through a pro, therefore says Mittel Rebbe, a person has to be constantly checking themselves. Constantly checking themselves, is this real? A way to get to this bittul, says the Mittel Rebbe talks about a lot about tzubrochenkeit. So a person has to be tzubrochen by themselves. Realize how they're not there yet. But a person has to constantly be making a cheshbon, is this real? Remember, why is real so important? Why is real so important? Because if it's not real, it's not a dira b'tachtoinim. If you're only convincing yourself that you now see Elokus, perceive, yeah? If you only convince yourself that I used to see something like this, and you convince yourself that now I see things different, but you're convincing yourself, but that's a chayin, it's not real. If you're only convincing yourself that you feel something, but it's not true, you don't feel something, you haven't changed. That's a chayin that you changed. You might have changed a bit. The shing is not changing. You changed, says you understand something you didn't understand before. But have you? Is it all the way? Have you truly changed? Remember, there's a big difference between having changed a bit and having truly changed. Truly changed means you see something now, you don't see it the old way. Not that you also see it the new way. You don't see it anymore the old way. A person that lives Hashgacha Pratis could be two things. He could get something bad can happen, and that will trigger straight away. He gets upset, he gets worried, and then he thinks, Hashgacha Pratis. Let me see if I can find Hashgacha Pratis. A person that's truly changed never gets bothered. He only sees the Hashgacha Pratis. It's sakronis. He's constantly, he's out of it. He's not emotional about this concept. He's constantly trying to see what's going to happen next. What does Abish have in mind next? So in order to do this, as Mitrebi, there needs to be emes. In order to have dira b'tachtonim, there needs to be emes. It needs to be real. And you need to focus on what's real. Okay. To be masakim, very simple. What is Shittas Chabad? Shittas Chabad is hisbonenus. That's what Shittas Chabad is. What's hisbonenus? Hisbonenus is das, means What's hisbonenus? Hisbonenus is where your mind. What's the purpose of hisbonenus? Where your mind sees things totally different. Mind starts to see things different. How do you get to that? So there's a process of hisbonenus which we haven't discussed much at all in this series. There's the process. We haven't discussed the process. We're just trying to get the picture of what it is that we want to do. What it is that we want to do is change our minds, change the way we perceive things, change the way we see things. And it says out there, okay, so the shit is hisbonenus. To learn and to connect and to relate. So to learn chassidus and to think it and to internalize it and to change our perception and then to learn more chassidus and to think about it, to internalize it, and to change our perception, and to do that again and again and again and again and again. Live thinking about hecher. To live thinking about hecher. You're going to have emotion? Brilliant. You have it? Check yourself. Is it real? But always remember, says the Mittler Rebbe, taking it a step further than the Alter Rebbe, emotion is not the ultimate. There's levels in emotion. And you have to remember the ultimate emotion is the one that makes you 100% bottle, which you could, by the way, get to academically. It's not emotion, it's only academically. The end thing is the same, is bittul. The end thing is bittul, which is, says the Mitzvah, but that's the most important thing, bittul to the Eibusha. You have changed. If you are bottle, emotion becomes less important. You are bottle. You become bottle telekus. And therefore, that is dira b'tachtonim in the ultimate, when the person has done that. So even if you can't get, so it's not shaykh for a beinani lamazagan to get to a bittul, to get to a spilos to get to a spilos alev, whether it's not possible, it is possible, but it's very, very challenging. So focus for amoinam, for most people, for regular people, you need to focus on the spoinus. Focus on just looking at the world different. You should think about hecher. Don't care about narishkeit. Don't care about the technicalities of Welt. Focus on hecher. Keep your mind on hecher. Not academically. Not academically meaning as a choiker. Not as a choiker. As a reality. Work to bring is an important point. Not as a choiker. You have choiker. Is it like this or is it like that? So Plato said, and so and so said, and also you have the Alter Rebbe and Chas v'Shalom. The point of this whole thing is of understanding a likus. This is in a way where Chassidus goes deeper than the Rambam. The point of understanding a likus is that the question is, it should change the internal perception of the world of the individual. But if you're koching in it, okay. I'll make the maskana of the maskana again. So the maskana is, what is Shittas Chabad? Is hisbonenus. That's Shittas Chabad. What's the purpose of hisbonenus? Is to change the way you look at things. Change the way you look at things, you'll change the way you feel about things also. You'll get an excitement. Today we discussed, says the Mittler Rebbe, just remember, focus on that. You want to focus on the excitement will be real, right? You want to focus, everything should be real. So focus on the hisbonenus. Focus on, keep that the emphasis. When it comes to a spilos, we'll deal with the level where the person is at. But more often, very, very often, that a spilos is not real. And therefore you have to be extremely careful that you don't get distracted by a fake spilos. Because it's just going to distract you from actually changing your mind. And from actually changing yourself. It's going to stop you before you're able to change. Because you're going to have achieved what you needed to. I got excited. No, that wasn't the point. The point was that you should understand the truth, relate to the truth, and it should change the way you see things, legamri, that you never see them the old way. So Shittas Chabad equals hisbonenus. Why hisbonenus? Because we need to change the way we see things. Because the human has to change. It's not enough that the Rebbe does it for him. The human has to change. What about emotion? Very important. Very important. Be careful that it's real. Not everybody's shaykh to big emotion. So be careful that it's real. And be careful that it's not being used as a distraction to being able to change the way you see things, that to stop halfway. Be careful it's not used as a distraction to stop halfway in your hisbonenus. Hope it's clear. I hope it was able to make a good sikkum of this Indian. Mitzvah Hashem, the next year, we're going to have actually two this week. We're going to have one in Mitzvah Hashem in another few days. So Mitzvah Hashem, the next year, we're going to begin to discuss what it's all about. We're going to talk about what does Eibusha want this for? What is it b'tachtonim? and the Ishtalshalos Advorim until how we're supposed to relate to the world. Hashem, that's going to be next. How we're supposed to relate to the world, what we're supposed to do about it, etc., etc. Seder, Gute Nacht.